All right, good evening, everyone. Thanks for joining us. We kind of put together a little weekly roundup of things in the news, interesting content for you guys. So, with me today is Victor Saxon, as always, and he actually dredged up the video that you see in front of you. So I don't know if you want to go into detail on what well, probably first we should make sure audio is okay. I don't know if anybody in the chat wants to comment on that.
If you can hear me very well, if you can hear my good friend Jim Dewey here very well, that'd be a good sign. But of course, that requires people watching the stream, which would also be appreciated in the instance that...
Oh, is there nobody here right now again?
There's one other person.
Okay.
There's one other person.
We might just keep on keeping on anyway.
Yeah, I guess so. I wish there was some way we could know we had good audio. We'll just have to trust our instincts like a true Giga Chad. Rely on our superior genetics, because as I'm sure you know, we both are gifted with very, very strong genes.
All right.
Certainly.
Audio's good, Bud Light says.
Oh, good. All right, nice. Then we can start. I'll give a little bit of a rundown of what this is. This is from almost 2 weeks ago. This is Anya Parampil, who is a journalist for The Gray Zone. For those who don't know, The Gray Zone is hilariously once classified by Wikipedia as a far-left and far-right news source. And Max Blumenthal, who basically co-founded The Gray Zone, puts that on like his Twitter banner because it's so funny that someone could be construed as far-left and far-right as a news source. But Gray Zone is like tanky central. They deny there's anything going on in the Xinjiang province when it comes to the Uyghurs in China. They defend North Korea. They defend Venezuela and Nicaragua, particularly Russia and Syria. As what was his name? Richard Silverstein once wrote, the kind of the motto of Gray Zone is whatever America is for, we're against, and whatever America is against, we're for. And that might be a bit of a straw man, but the point is, you want some good tanky content, you go to Gray Zone. And so this is where this journalist is from. Now, I like what Anya Parampil is doing in this video because she's confirming basically what Tucker Carlson said in the summer of 2021, where he suspected he was being spied on by the NSA. And there was an Axios article that alluded to a Russian intermediary that was helping Tucker Carlson set up an interview with Vladimir Putin. So the point is, this journalist, Anya Parampil, was the so-called Russian intermediary that was referred to in the Axios article. And so she wrote an article and is talking with Glenn Greenwald here on his show about that. But there's a particular part, because this is in fact the TANKIE Report, that were you able to play the intro, Jim?
Yeah, I played it. I'm not sure if anyone was here to watch it. Just real quick, too, I'm looking at my frame rate, and I'm dropping like 51% frames, so I am going to stop dual streaming on Odyssey. It appears my interwebs cannot handle that, so...
What a shame. Next time you'll have to find a mainframe computer or something.
Yeah, I will have to get my Fed handlers to invest in my infrastructure.
Or find whatever PC that was able to play Crysis 3 on 1080p. Yeah, if you're able to find that PC, you're pretty much...
I actually have a pretty good PC. I don't think it's my computer. I think it's the fact that I live in the boonies and there's not a whole lot of like internet infrastructure.
You live in northern Alaska.
I live deep in the bowels of a hidden bunker like Mark Levin, if anyone remembers him.
Mark Levin? That sounds
He was
familiar.
a conservative talk show host. He was kind of influential on me. He wrote a couple of books. He was kind of like a late-night Rush Limbaugh, except he yelled a lot more. He is also of the tribe.
Yeah, okay,
well,
Mark Levin say was as if he died. He's still alive. He's 65.
Yeah, he is still alive. I didn't mean to give the impression that he is no longer living. He may as well be dead as far as I'm concerned because I haven't thought about or listened to him in some time. So
is he dead in your mind?
He is dead to me.
Yeah. But anyhow, there's a particular clip that we wanted to show from this interview. Obviously not the whole thing. That's not exactly what we're talking about. But I know when it comes to these, who we tend to support in the Russia-Ukraine thing might be at odds with what we're critiquing here. But there's just a choice of words that I wanted to highlight that I thought was kind of egregious. So that's what we're going to do. Are you ready to go, Jim?
Yeah, fire it up.
Okay.
Ago, Tucker did finally talk about this publicly, give some more information regarding what actually happened. He told the Full Send podcast that this all had to do with his plan to travel to Russia in the summer of 2021, which is really just months before the latest escalation in this war happened, when Russia launched its military escalation in Ukraine in February of 2022.
So this might seem like linguistic nitpicking, but I think if anyone's intellectually honest, they should take a little bit of issue with the notion that what Russia did, and she said it clearly. It wasn't like escalating tensions in 2021 or whatever. She said clearly in February 2022, the escalation that happened that Russia did. But what was the exact phrase she used? Let's go back again.
Months before the latest escalation in this war happened, when Russia launched its military escalation in Ukraine.
Look at the word she's searching for. Like, why not just say invasion when that's obviously what it was?
Right, she's very clearly trying to mince words on the subject. In her defense, well, number one, escalation implies that there was already an ongoing conflict, which, if you consider like the low-intensity conflict that was going on with respect to Crimea as part of this conflict, which most people don't.
Or the Donbass.
Perhaps. Yeah, that as well. I can see where you're coming from, but I don't think that's what I don't think she was looking to have a nuanced discussion on what constitutes the continuation of a war.
And she said clearly, February of 2022. We know late in February 2022, that's when the invasion happened. And then she said military, and for some reason she didn't say invasion. She had to search her mind for some kind of word-mincing euphemism.
And mind you, we're not like Ukrainian shills
exactly.
here either.
No, exactly. We're not shitlibs.
So I think, and this is what people, especially on 4chan and other places where the dissident right hangs out, fails to understand. It's like, just because Russia is anti-globo homo in this particular instance does not necessarily mean they're on our side. And I've got no illusions, of that fact either. Like, I don't think Vladimir Putin is sympathetic to the cause of the dissident right in the United States. The only cause he's sympathetic to is, the expansion of a neo-Russian empire and sort of restoring the Soviet Union to its former glory. Like, the things that leaders of nations ought to be concerned about for their own people. So, just because I'm pretty anti-Ukraine does not mean I am pro-Russian. Those two things are mutually exclusive.
That is important to point out. Russia is not as based as I would like them to be. But for what it's worth, Putin did say, and I'm trying to find the article to confirm it. Yeah, so June 2013, sorry for the noise, Putin did say that the first Soviet government was mostly Jewish, which, good for him. At least he's aware of that. I put the archive link in the chat as well, just for confirmation of that. But perhaps just what rubs me the wrong way, despite, I'm sure, the overlap people like us would have with someone like Anya Parampel or people of the gray zone, I don't like sophistic euphemizing. Like, it just rubs me the wrong way. Similar to when I was watching sort of an animated video of how an abortion is carried out, particularly a late-term abortion. And, like, after they remove the limbs of the child within the mother's womb, the phrase was then used, the doctor evacuates the contents afterwards. In other words, you remove what's left of the corpse inside the mother's womb.
Just call a spade a spade. You can debate the morality
of
the action that you're taking, but for good Lord, that seems to give insight into like your sense of morality is sort of at war with whatever this action is, so you feel the need to couch it in sophistic language. Like, I don't know, that just rubs me the wrong way. We can talk about the legitimacy of the invasion of Ukraine. We can talk about how Donetsk, Luhansk, and Crimea really got lumped into Ukraine as part of a Soviet administrative error during the collapse of the Soviet Union. We can talk about how it's not really justifiable for NATO to continue incorporating, more and more countries slowly creeping east towards the Russian border into their anti-Russian military alliance, and how that cannot be allowed to stand, how the United States would not tolerate that. if the Russians or the Chinese were to do that with Mexico. But, like, I don't know. I'm with you, man. It really rubs me the wrong way.
And just to, like, put a bit of an exclamation point on it, not to beat this dead horse any further, but these are the same kinds of people. If you were to go to an Aaron Mate or an Max Blumenthal, those people that I call are on the tanky left or the anti-imperialist left, and you were to call them pro-Russian, they would get very, very indignant, and partially for good reason, because obviously if you're making nuanced arguments in the whole Russia-Ukraine thing, you get called a pro-Putin or pro-Russian stooge when most likely you're not. So it's a slur. But the problem is, when they get indignant at being called pro-Russian or bought by the Kremlin, they pull shit like this, where seemingly at every turn, they try to minimize the fact that Russia did invade a sovereign nation and are, look at what the Gray Zone's doing now. They had their hit piece article about Alexei Navalny, who's an opposition leader against Vladimir Putin, and they had a hit piece on him and the Oscar award-winning documentary, which could be propagandistic bullshit. I'm not saying it's not, but like they do that, and they seem to be struggling to call a spade when it comes to an invasion. They say the Bucha massacre in March 2022 was not perpetrated by the Russian government. It's like, I know you're probably not pro-Russian, but you shouldn't get as mad as you do for getting called pro-Russian and you pull bullshit like this. That's my opinion.
They're just intellectually incapable of accepting any other position other than Russia bad, or United States bad.
Yes. Yeah, that's exactly what's going on. But, so speaking of that, we can segue into another video. Would you mind getting around to that, Mr. Dewey?
Yeah, absolutely. I thought that it was already queued up here. Let me just pull it up real quick.
And then this one is going to be a recent discussion that Michael Tracy had with Dylan Burns. It was about 9 days ago. Now, of course, Dylan Burns, I'm not like a huge fan of. He's an ugly-looking degenerate who's also partially censorious in his beliefs. When he was talking with
Is there
Adam and
any
Sitch
crime that
Adam and Sitch show, he conveyed a level of support for criminalizing Holocaust denial, because he's just that kind of authoritarian neo-lib. In that way, he kind of has that tendency. He's a big Syria anti-Assad war hawk, which, again, we're not Bashar al-Assad stands, but for some reason, it's a very particular shit-lib position to have to take the relatively pro-war position on the Syrian civil war. That's just what I found to be the case. So I'm not big on Dylan Burns, and I think Michael Tracy is a very, very good commentator who gets a lot of very important issues right. He's done some good journalism on the BLM riots in the summer of 2020 and the BS that happened there. So I think he's a very valuable commentator who I'm not like supremely critical of. But again, he does the same stuff that you found with Anya Parampil, the kind of minimizing obscurantism that happens, and that's how he earns the title of tanky from someone like me. So we're gonna see some of that on display, I would argue.
And for background on this video as well, what they're referencing here is a Ukrainian strike on the bridge that connects Crimea. So the Russian military is using this bridge to transport war materials, so arms, equipment, the things you need to prosecute a war across this bridge. And Michael Tracy here is pretty butthurt about the fact that 4 Russian civilians, incidentally, in this strike on a piece of critical military infrastructure, died in a war zone. So with that background, we'll go ahead and fire it up.
Let her rip.
an attack? For example, if we have Adolf Hitler in a room and some like perfectly innocent 20-year-old German male boy, and I could blow up the room and avoid the Second World War, everybody would say, yes, do it. I think you would say it. I would say it. I think everybody would probably
Let's
say
focus
yes.
on this particular incident.
Well, I just want to get an acknowledgement of that first, that you would agree with me in that instance, that there are some scenarios where a certain amount of civilian casualties are just going to be unavoidable to some degree, right? Right?
I mean, I don't know that. In these cockamamie hypotheticals,
Well, then
possibly. I'm talking about the real world.
So the idea that civilians might die by accident as a foreseen but unfortunate consequence of prosecuting a war is a cockamamie hypothetical, but
Yeah, I know.
In the real world, we can conduct military strikes where only members of foreign armed or adversarial parties are belligerents rather are killed.
Well,
That's the real world we live in, Victor.
Right. Well, I mean, it's funny because Sam Harris actually had a thought experiment. Have you heard of his perfect weapon thought experiment?
No, I haven't.
I mean, a component of that is what if we had perfect weapons where we could just kill with absolute precision any particular person that we wanted to without hurting anyone else, without any measure or degree of collateral damage. That'd be a perfect weapon. And the point of it is to demonstrate the morality of certain people or groups. Like, what would they do if they had a perfect weapon? Who would they kill if they had the opportunity? But the point is, that's literally a fictional philosophical construct that Sam Harris invented. The idea of a perfect weapon that could take out enemies or foes with near impossible precision. That seems to be the standard that Michael Tracy has for apparently doing anything on a military level. Like, you need to have perfect weapons in order to do anything to any military capacity.
And my intuition with this guy tells me, too, that if the shoe were on the other foot and the Russians had conducted a similar strike on Ukrainian territory, like, I don't know if he's commented on this, but there were instances in which the Ukrainians were digging in artillery pieces next to, like, civilian population centers, like next to a school, and, you know, headline is, oh, Russians bombed a school because they missed by, like, 50 yards. I guarantee you he would be like, well, you know, in the real world, you know,
yeah,
like,
yes, he would not give a shit. His heart would be stone, I think.
Because there is nothing the United States can do, or the United States and their vassal states, in this case Ukraine, can do that is not, you know, an absolute evil.
There's many different scenarios where, like, for example, in the real world, there have been many times where, like, terror leaders or others are, like, in an area and they could be killed, but there's civilians in the area. And the calculus needs to be made. Do we kill this person who's planning a terror attack that could kill 100 more? Or do we not pull the trigger, let him go, let the other people go, but then have the terror attack happen and then lose 100 people? When has that happened?
Yeah, I mean, give me an example.
Osama bin Laden's an example if we had to make that calculation multiple times. But we eventually went with the raid, and we decided that this was the safest option to save the most civilians. It was considered just literally just obliterating the house and everyone in it, because it would have been the safest bet to probably kill him. But then you would still need to land and get the body and confirm that. But these types of considerations go on in like definitely in like what's that room?
So
what's the room where
they riddled bullets into the bodies of the civilians who happened to be in the structure there, so they could kill a guy on dialysis who was sort of a non-entity in terms of operational involvement in the actual terrorist capabilities.
Are you against the Osama bin Laden raid?
I'm not. It's not something that I would go out of my way to justify as being morally righteous. Sorry.
I will say that I believe killing Osama bin Laden was morally justified. I will make that commitment.
Great. I mean, I'm not
Several times, and I've seen this guy speak before on other subjects. You cannot pin him down. When confronted by other people, you cannot get him to agree to any premise, take any sort of stance. Like, this guy won't admit that killing Osama bin Laden, if the 9/11 narrative is true, which I'm certain this man believes, or, well, maybe not. I don't know. But
I'm sure he barely has a position on it.
Right,
I'm
sure
it's like, I'm skeptical of the 2004 9/11 Commission report. I think there are uncertainties. You know, it doesn't really lend itself a clear yes or no answer whether I agree to what the original story stipulates. It's exactly what he would say.
in the habit, maybe unlike you or others, of justifying the incineration of civilians or the pummeling with bullets of civilians. It's just not my...
And he uses this bizarre language here, too, like pummeling with bullets.
Obviously loaded propagandistic language.
Well, that doesn't even make sense. You don't pummel somebody with a bullet like that. And in my mind, right, if you say somebody was pummeled with bullets, I'm envisioning like somebody walking up to the corpse of a civilian and just unloading into them for no reason. Like, ultimately, these were civilians who knew that they were in a war zone. They were on this bridge, which is being utilized to transport military goods. Like, ultimately, I'm not trying to victim blame here, but you have to understand that they bear some culpability in it too. Like, hordes and hordes of people got out of Ukraine because they knew it was a war zone. They knew by chance, even if they weren't directly involved, they could do everything right, you know, and they could still end up dying. So,
right.
But the thing is, Michael,
Ordinary
I don't think
practice.
there's any war ever you would ever justify. And so I feel like there's like, these are, for example, these are difficult questions. The idea of like taking out a terrorist to decide if you take out, and I'm
So aside from Osama bin Laden or like the theoretical Hitler example,
Well, like,
do you not think the incineration of the 4 people on the bridge was justified? So the 4
Incineration. As though they
Incineration.
threw him into a cremator.
Well, that crematorium doesn't even burn all the way. The bones are still left. I've come to
Hey,
learn.
cool
So-
it.
Oh, my
Cool it.
bad. I'll check myself.
4 people who are
If-
deceased.
if-
You're
it-
thinking
it completely-
them
it
being deceased compels you not to doesn't compel you to cast judgment in any kind of negative way on that attack.
I think it's one of those scenarios, and I'm going to do the thing that you did when it came to Bucha, where it's going to depend upon the amount of information.
Wait, what did I do?
On you were like talking about how like Bucha might have not been real, that you don't know for sure.
I never said no.
Wait. Are you 100% positive of that? Because I have the clip from April 5th when you
I
wanted.
said it might have never been real.
Wait. Let me be
I never
clear.
said anything like that.
You were making the accusation on April 5th. On an Indian TV show. You were with somebody from Kiev. I don't know the name of the host. I don't know what it is with Indian TV shows. They have like 12 or 13,
it's
14
Republic-
fucking guests or whatever. Where it was
I know,
on Republic.
those panelists are like it's like a circus. It's insane. It's worse than American TV.
It's very bad. I should bring that back to Twitch. But you were on the show, and when they were talking about Bucha and they were playing footage of Bucha, and I have the clip if you want to watch it so everybody knows the full context of what you said.
Yeah, play it. Go ahead and play the full thing.
Okay, I can pull up the full thing. But from what I garnered from this,
Let's play the full thing. But let's have you. I mean, why don't I mean?
Okay.
You don't have to answer or not. It's fine. I mean, I'm the one who's being interviewed here or on the hot seat or whatever.
No,
so
I'll answer your question.
You
Just give me a second. Let me just.
So, like, do you or do you not think that the death of those 4 civilians was a justified byproduct of an attack that you fundamentally support?
I would, if I knew that 4 civilians would have died, I would have averted the operation. The question would be, did they know that those civilians were going to die, and what information did they have going into the attack?
And that's kind of a limp-wristed take in and of itself. Like, 4 civilians are going to die, therefore you call off a military strike. Like, I'm not meaning to be callous or devalue human life, but number one, let's talk about how many people are going to be killed by the continuation of this conflict and the continued importation of arms and ammunition and stuff like that. But also, in the grand scheme of things, like, four people isn't a lot. That's not. And again, Michael Tracy said that these are Ukrainian terror bombings, which, like, when I think of a terror bombing, right, I think of a targeted aerial campaign on a civilian population center designed to erode the will of the people to continue to fight. And for those of you who aren't necessarily well-versed in military matters, there's a very simple battle calculus that is used to sort of, gauge the capacity of a nation to continue prosecuting a war. And it's the means, so the equipment, the war materiel of a nation multiplied by the will of that nation to fight equals their capacity to wage that war. And when either of them drops to 0, so too does the ability of that nation to continue fighting. So a good example of the will of the people to fight dropping to 0 would be the global war on terror. The West just got sick of prosecuting that war, even though they had near infinite resources comparatively. And, the United States fails to achieve its strategic objectives. So maybe I'm being pedantic just because this is my wheelhouse, but that's an incredibly disingenuous statement to call it a terror bombing as though this is the, Royal Air Force and U.S. Army Air Corps dropping incendiary bombs on Dresden just cuz.
Yeah, or lighting up the straw huts of Japan or Tokyo, as if that's the same thing. And I like how one of the live chatters, I don't know if it's showing on the screen, but one of them also say that as long as that bridge exists, then Russia is able to move supplies and potentially troops from on that bridge to Ukraine and then potentially get your own people killed. So it's like the longer that bridge is there, then you're putting your own people at risk technically.
I feel like this is like some sort of conversation you would hear in a 100 level philosophy class in undergrad. Like, oh, is it moral to let civilians die? Well, I mean, it was an unforeseen consequence. Like, this is basic, consequentialism, utilitarian type stuff. Like, and Michael Tracy is very clearly an intelligent individual. He's more than capable of, like, working through this and coming to these conclusions of his own accord. I think he is willfully not doing so because, again, these tankies just cannot accept that there is any instance in which the evil capitalists in the West are doing, something that is not an unmitigated evil.
Exactly. That is the absolute through line litmus test for who is a tankie is the mantra of America bad. It completely permeates every part of their ideology. America bad or West bad or Israel bad. Now, of course, again, we're not like stands for Israel. We're not a bunch of paid Zionist feds about Israel or anything like that. But, that's also an aspect of their thinking.
Those are the type of determinations that's the information I would need to know to make the full determination. But if I knew they would die in advance, I would wait till another day to do that type of a strike. If there's another opening available, but it could be a situation where this was the one opening, like, we're here. If we turn around now, the Russians are going to know, yada, yada, yada. And so this is the access to the information I would need to make the determination. I gave you an answer. I gave you the answer.
That's not an answer. The attack has been done. You know what the consequences were. 4 civilians were incinerated. It's then for you to make a determination as to whether you're going to proactively declare that to be justified or not.
Okay, so I don't have all the access to all the information because I was in the command room. I don't know.
But all the information we need is that 4 civilians were incinerated.
That's not.
What more information do you need?
No. That's not at all true. If that's all.
Of course it is.
Wait. Okay.
What more information do you need? So what if you were able to? Do you know any particular significant battles that completely eradicated another side's? Basically, their entire military capability was pretty much wiped out in one sweep. Do you know of any landmark historical instances like that?
Cannae, Teutoburg Forest are the two that sort of come to mind.
Do you remember when specifically those happened or which war?
I mean, those were Roman military campaigns.
Oh, okay.
So one was in the Punic Wars, and the other was a war, one of the campaigns in Gaul.
So then take those very swift and decisive victories, you would say, right? But because you knew 4 civilians of the other side died, that's all you need to know, apparently, when it comes to conducting that operation. So you should call it off, right?
Well, and this is one of those things, too, where, I've sort of been... There's a theory, and it's kind of a simple theory that's been percolating in my mind that, ultimately all these wars that have been, increasingly destructive wars that have been waged in the West have had a dysgenic effect on, in particular, the male population. All the high testosterone, highway of death too, Bud Light says. I mean, that's another instance. If you're not familiar with the highway of death, essentially the Iraqi army
right?
was that was in Iraq, and the Iraqi army was trying to flee utilizing a highway, and we BTFO'd them so hard they retroactively called it a genocidal act or a war crime. But and my train of thought is easily derailed here, so but it's had a dysgenic effect on the all the high T Uber Chads end up dying, and we're left with men like this who this wouldn't have even been a consideration. The barbarians wouldn't have cared. In fact, they would have actively targeted,
Yeah, would they have given a rip about Roman civilians? Would they have called off their operations if they knew some Roman civilians would have died?
It's like, did anybody at Verdun care that, they couldn't dial in their artillery pieces accurately enough to not only not guarantee that they wouldn't hit civilians, but that they wouldn't hit their own men, especially as they're putting thousands of rounds to the barrels of these artillery pieces and completely stripping the rifling from the barrels? Like, these are things that happened. Like, I don't know. I feel like we're left with a very low T type of. I mean, this guy looks like the soy jack. I mean,
he
the
does.
receding hairline. He looks like a boomer brain.
No, he does. God did not give him any gifts in that department.
Well, I mean, this dude looks like he's got fetal alcohol syndrome, and I'm not meaning to rip on people for their appearance, but There's got to be a degree of truth to physiognomy. I'm sorry. You can.
Yeah.
You can.
Well, as we found out last month with Milton Diamond, you remember that dude?
Yes, I do.
Yeah, I mean, physiognomy does not lie. There's a reason it's a heuristic. Grug knows what he's doing when it comes to that department, at least the Grug part of our brains.
The brain is really good at pattern recognition.
Yes.
So let me ask you a question. Let's say I make the determination that I should drive down a street, right? And that it's perfectly moral and it's a good thing to do. But then 5 children jump out in front of my car and I run them all over and I'm like, fuck, I just killed 5 kids. Now are we going to say, obviously, Dylan driving down that street that day was immoral? It was wrong? No, it was not immoral or wrong for me. And if somebody didn't know about that information, they wouldn't be able to make the full moral justification. I don't have the access to the information of the command room of how the operation went down. Let me finish. I'm trying to give you a nuanced answer and I feel like you're throwing it off purposely, right? And I allow you a lot of verbose nuance.
All right, sorry, go ahead.
Okay. Now, I'm saying if I knew in advance that those 4 civilians were going to die, I probably would have called it off because I'm just a pussy, right? I would have called it off and I would have tried to find another moment. I don't know if they had that information, if they knew that those civilians were going to get killed in the explosion, or what calculations they made for the accumulation of collateral damage in this type of strike. I don't know. But knowing what I do know, if I knew 4 civilians would have died, I would have avoided striking that day and would have tried to strike another day. Either way, I don't think it was a terror bombing. And either way, I do think they should have struck that bridge.
Okay. So whatever you may have done, if you hypothetically were in the command center on the day that they decided to launch the attack, set that aside. You're an observer. You're somebody looking from afar. You're not operationally involved. And you see that
Is this guy fucking smoking weed?
Yes, he is. Yeah, no, he does. Or he could be vaping. Could be.
No, he just lit up a pipe.
Okay, yeah. So,
what a degenerate.
No,
the attack has been carried out. You are then told what the ramifications were. One of the ramifications were that 4 people were incinerated.
We're gonna do a stream on marijuana usage and alcohol usage, honestly.
Sure.
Now you just spent a whole lot of time saying that it was a legitimate military target, that it was valid to target because it somehow garnered a military advantage for Ukraine. Yeah, exactly. So you think it was you were giving all kinds of reasons why the attack was justified. So I asked you to kind of clarify the issue. Given your statements as to the justifiability of the attack, that therefore means that the incineration of the 4 civilians doesn't undermine your certainty that the attack was justified. So not how you would have done it ideally or how the people who did the attack personally should have carried it out logistically. But once it's done, once you can evaluate what consequences it had, you still come ultimately to the conclusion that it was justified, right?
I believe that it was a justified strike, yes.
Okay, Michael is making such a banal point here. Like just to give a crappy analogy on the spot, if you knew in order to get stronger, you had to work out. You had to exercise your muscles. And after the first day, you would be sore. Your muscles would be sore all over. Or you do like 15 or 20 push-ups for the first time in a long, long time. The next day, you really start to feel it in your upper chest. You start to feel a lot of pain and soreness there. And then Michael would go around saying, so that pain you inflicted on yourself, you're saying that it was justified, or like you're justifying the infliction of self-harm upon yourself. It's like, well, it was for a bigger purpose. There's no other reason I would have done it.
Right. I mean, and he's just talking without saying anything to fill time and sort of stall and hoping if he just throws enough words at the issue itself will go away and he himself will continue to look intelligent. But I mean, there's his thoughts on the matter are pretty surface level.
Yeah, well, I mean, people like to use the word verbose a lot whenever someone shows off a rich vocabulary or something, and that's not what verbose means. Verbose literally means unnecessarily wordy. And Michael Tracy is unnecessarily wordy. Like, he uses way too many words, big and small, to describe what he's trying to say. Like, you run into this all the time. I remember clicking on a video when he was talking with Glenn Greenwald that went on for like 10 minutes about the Chinese spy balloons. Remember when that was going on?
Right.
That sort of thing. And I was like, okay, what's Michael Tracy's view on this? And then I think I remember, maybe I wasn't paying close attention, but after 10 minutes, I'm like, I actually don't even know what he was saying. I don't know what his position actually is on it.
Well,
I didn't
don't you know a
actually,
civilian could have got hurt by balloon debris, therefore shooting down the spy balloon is an immoral, completely evil action taken by the United States.
Oh, probably. I wouldn't be surprised if you made that argument. Yeah.
Okay, so the notwithstanding the incineration of 4 civilians, you think it was justified?
Absolutely.
Okay, so where you and I differ is that I don't think I've ever, since I've been at least an adult with any kind of moderately sophisticated understanding of the world, and not to say that my understanding is sophisticated, but you know what I mean, like since I've been anything other than just sort of a impetuous sort of teenager or whatever, I've never gone out of my way to justify any military action that led to the incineration of civilians. So that's just
okay.
I guess a philosophical gulf between us.
Okay, okay. Any war.
I wish you would just say death of civilian. Like, I don't know how you can take yourself, let alone expect others to take you seriously when you want to use language like that.
Yeah,
and
if language like that were used in reference to those killed by the Russians, he would call it inflammatory or incendiary or war porn rhetoric.
Actually, it was just a famine. You know?
I mean, that's something that I would love to ask all the Jimmy Dore types or the Aramate types. Like, what do you actually think about the Soviet Union? Because they, strangely enough, don't talk about it a lot. They always talk about modern things. It's like, what do you actually think of the Soviet Union? Do you think Stalin was justified to sign the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact? Is that what it was called? The
Yes.
pact with Stalin? I'm sorry, the pact with Hitler. What do you think about their invasion of Hungary, the invasion of Czechoslovakia, the invasion of Afghanistan?
The invasion of Poland. The invasion of Poland, for which they condemned the Third Reich, Nazi Germany. That is the casus belli that led to the Second World War. The war against Germany was the invasion of Poland. But somehow it's okay when, the Soviet Union did it with them. They literally partitioned Poland together.
Yeah, or the invasion of Finland. That also happened at that time.
Yeah, the Winter War.
Do you think Holodomor? Do you think that was just a famine, bro, instead of a forced starvation of millions of people? Or what do you actually think on all these Soviet atrocities? Like, I would want to get an answer from them. I want to see whether they say, well, actually, the official narrative of the Stalin show trials has a lot more merit than one would say. And it's not any different from what happened in the Red Scare in the United States. Or Stalin didn't kill as many people as you say. I wonder if they would start making those arguments, because that's when their positions become less tenable. And I think they know that, which is why they don't talk about it as much. They know how weird they are when they start giving those kinds of arguments. So if I were to ever, in the rare instance, get to talk to these people, I would love to ask them that every time.
Well, and I mean, they just know true Scotsman fallacy into oblivion. That's not real communism.
Oh, that's too. Well, again, as we were
okay,
discussing before, though, they walk a weird line where it's like, well, it wasn't real communism or socialism, but the Soviet Union did have very tremendous GDP growth once Stalin took power, and they were the real reason we won World War II, not the United States. Especially the Pacific Theater too. It wasn't the atomic bomb. It was the Soviet Union is actually the reason.
I would love to engage him on that subject personally. Not that he would ever deign to speak to, a plebe like myself, but I guarantee you would take that position that the Soviet Union was the reason for victory in the Second World War. And
absolutely, yeah.
But when Admiral Zhukov himself, or General Zhukov, Marshal Zhukov, Jesus Christ, I am.
Put away the bottle
himself. Yeah, whatever his rank was, it doesn't matter. Some Russian dude said that the United States was responsible for it.
Oh, okay.
Well, no, I just stuck my foot in my mouth there.
That's good to know.
Yeah, there are a number of Soviet officials that recognize that without things like, food and trucks supplied by the United States, the Soviet Union never would have come out on top.
Civilians. That's an inevitability of warfare. Do you agree with that basic premise? Okay. Therefore,
I agree. That's why warfare ought to generally be avoided.
But that also makes me think that there is basically no scenario, unless it's literally forced upon you, and even then, I think you would try to avoid it, that you would ever declare war, right? Like, I think, I can't imagine a scenario, Michael, where you would actually say, this is a justified use of force of the state. And so, me thinking that, I just kind of feel like it feels like this is a very difficult moral question for people to parse, the idea that making decisions that could lead to the deaths of civilians, but doing it for the greater good of society or your people or your nation. These are determinations that all world leaders, all governments have to make. And I feel like your answer to the question is, I just don't want to answer it. and you just avoided it altogether.
Oh, I'll happily answer it. I mean, if a scenario is put to me, or if a proposal is put to me as to whether I think it would be justified to declare war, and I know with almost total certainty that's going to result in the mass destruction of civilians, then I can evaluate that on its own terms. And you're probably right to say that more likely than not, I'm going to say no, because I think warfare is one of the craziest things.
Yeah, but you go further than basically everyone on
capable
this.
Of.
You go further than basically everybody except for ANCAPs and pacifists do. I even asked Larry Sharp. Larry Sharp was the Libertarian governor candidate for New York. I asked him on the show, and it took me an hour and a half, but eventually I got him to agree. Yeah, I would have intervened in World War II. But when I ask you about questions like that, right? What's your answer for that? Do you think America should have joined the war?
Well, I mean, I know people in the comments or whatever who don't like me to begin with, which is fine because, I'm not going to please everyone. I accept that. But my unwillingness to give you a flat yes or no answer to that is going to be interpreted as me evading the issue or being suspicious.
Because that's precisely what's happening.
Right, yeah.
You can't just in before away an argument. That's not how life works.
As much as it is a tempting thing to do, that is unfortunately not an argument, as some would say. And he said suspicious rather than specious. He got really mad when we pre-watched that video that he said suspicious rather than specious.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't feel the need to comment on it after I used 2 ranks before the third and final correct rank for Zhukov.
Yeah. Put away the bottle, Jim. There's more to life than drinking.
Or somehow dissembling.
What specific question do I need to ask you?
That question is in no possible sense conducive to a flat yes or no answer. It simply isn't. So I can't just say yes or no. I would have intervened because what point in time are you even talking about? What led up to it?
Okay, let me ask. Okay, I'll be more specific then. Do you think we should have sent the Soviet Union and the United Kingdoms the weapons we were before we entered World War II? Because people think American military involvement started with Pearl Harbor. That's not necessarily true. We were sending military aid to the UK and the Soviet Union. I think it was the correct thing to do because Hitler was a threat to the world. He was destabilizing Europe. He was killing millions of people, mass sponsor. I think it was good to send weapons to Soviet Union and the UK, just like I think it's good to send weapons to Zelensky, even though and the Ukrainian government, even though obviously Hitler and Putin are the same person, but the same principle applies for me. So would you have sent those weapons?
Let's remember here, this is a positive act, as we clarified when we were prepping earlier, right, Jim? The idea of sending weapons. Either you do send the weapons or you don't.
Correct.
First of all, it wasn't just that the U.S. had engaged in the war by sending weapons via Lend-Lease or what have you. There was also undeclared, quote-unquote, naval warfare with Germany in the...
And he is right on this point. I actually was first introduced to Michael Tracy by you, Victor, and we watched... sort of his refutation of the idea that the United States involvement in the European theater in World War II was just. And he does bring up the point that, we were effectively engaged in an undeclared war with the Kriegsmarine long before Germany declared war on us. That's where Hitler said he was just recognizing the fact that a state of war did in fact exist between the United States and Germany. So, I don't want to throw, good arguments away with, bad actors.
Right, yeah, and I put the link to the call-in episode that we're referring to in the chat.
And that was good. He actually gets pretty ass blasted. It's kind of funny when he starts engaging with one of these hecklers who I guess
one of
calls
a very
pretty frequently.
A very tribal heckler named Jonathan, who gets very, very pissy at him for the kind of arguments he make. I mean, it is a total cat fight reminiscent bitch fest that they go after each other. I mean, it is entertaining, I can say, without a doubt.
In the North Sea that Roosevelt had already secretly ordered by August of 1941, months before Pearl Harbor. But to your question, would I or would I have not sent those weapons to the UK and the Soviet Union? Well, here's a reason why I sort of bristle at the idea of offering a kind of flat yes or no moral endorsement to a historically contingent hypothetical like that, because I mean, if I could point to a universe where Lend-Lease wasn't given, and then so World War II, as we understand it today, which is a global conflagration with tens and tens of millions of deaths to its name, never happened, then I would have a standing to say, oh, obviously I was right that Lend-Lease shouldn't have been delivered to those countries because it averted the war. But here's how I will answer it. Okay, I think extreme caution ought to be exercised when a decision is on the menu as to whether to exacerbate or intensify warfare versus not doing so, because the nature of war is that once it's ongoing and once it's then fueled even further, it then gathers momentum and explodes, and that explosion ultimately could cause more deaths than maybe the person who made that initial decision would have been mindful of. Okay, so...
Okay, like, for the record, check me on this if this is a valid analogy, okay, compared to what he's saying. The classic instance of the mugger. The mugger comes over to me, he pulls out a knife, he wants my wallet. Now I have a choice. I could give him the wallet and I could reduce tensions. But then if I were to pull out the gun that I have a closed carry license for and say, back away, boy, I'm not giving you a wallet, Michael Tracy would probably argue against that, right? Because it would increase the tension of the situation.
Oh, yeah, I would imagine
increase the propensity for death to happen. So in other words, don't defend yourself. Saying,
like, again, he's trying to use... He's very verbose, you're right. I mean, he's trying to make himself seem a lot smarter than he is by saying a bunch of words, and there is some merit to what he is trying to get to the bottom of, which, to crystallize it, is, well, by not supplying Lend-Lease, I can foresee an alternate reality wherein a lot more people died because the war was continued for much longer as a result. And we can make that argument. Obviously, we can't know what would have been, but we can... Like, I'm willing to hear him out on that point, but damn, I mean, this guy has mastered the art of speaking without saying anything. It's like that meme, and I don't know if maybe you have it on hand, where it's the guy, and he's like, at first I was sad because someone stole my bike, but then, I figured whoever stole my bike is happier to have the bike than I am sad to lose it. Therefore,
I don't have that meme, but that does sound interesting.
But yeah, he just goes on for some time. So we'll continue on with the next phase of our little stream here, the Libertarian Report, if I can make OBS transition. The LOLBERT
yes,
Report.
You know what it's actually called. It's the LOLBERT Report. Excuse me.
So, on some level, I do identify with libertarians, right? Because I think a lot of them are pretty principled. And there was a point in time, especially if you start to question Christian religious norms, that it's like, okay, I just want to live and let live, but they end up just being... They're worse than conservatives because they don't even attempt to conserve anything. They'll just acquiesce to whatever the net. Well, I can't make... They're consenting adults. I don't know why we should stop them from doing anything. So just to show you how far gone the libertarians are, we'll just take a look at this sickening...
This was kind of blackpilling, I'm not going to lie. It gave me the impetus to come up with the new format we're trying for the show, so I guess there's some good that came from it. But this made me kind of sick. And it vindicates B. Williams. You remember B. Williams, right? When he's been telling me all this time that libertarians actually kind of suck. And I was a very big tent in my attitudes. I still kind of am. Where it's like, I mean, yeah, I don't agree with everything they say, but they're still valuable against fighting off, woke people, those who want to take away our guns.
Oftentimes, libertarians are baby's first red pill.
Right, yeah. I mean, would you agree when I say there's some merit to the idea of the libertarian to alt-right pipeline? It's like, it is kind of where a lot of people start, especially after Gamergate, where people are leaving the cathedral step by step.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So, shall not be infringed. Freedom is most threatened when hate is popularized. And I thought this was like an edit at some point. Like this was a deep fake, but this is actually the Libertarian Party of Louisiana. It's got 2,100 followers, which sounds about right. There's probably about 2,000 actual libertarians in the great state of Louisiana. So, but bigots are allies of the state. Like they are siding with trannies after a mass shooting and kind of victim blaming in that regard. Hating or fearing people based on innate characteristics leads to big government violations such as gun bans. Like, yeah, let's let these people conduct drag shows and strip dance in front of children. Let's encourage these children who are not even, like, in some instances fully self-aware, like 3-year-old children. Let's convince them to lop off their penis. Like,
no, that's not happening. But if it did, it wouldn't be a bad thing.
And mentally ill is in quotations. So I mean, these guys are just, and that's my great frustration with in particular American conservatism. It's like these people fail to conserve anything. They don't have any real, because when you buy into these narratives just a little bit to get your brownie points, your goodie points,
yeah.
When you say I'm not racist, you are accepting the moral framework constructed by the powers that be, wherein you are the baddie, and there will be a slow shift of the Overton window left, and this just sort of vindicates me on that point.
No, that's true, and it's probably not a temptation to our audience, thankfully, but for a good deal of people who sometimes feel that urge to win some kind of approval from the shitlibs when it comes to race or other social issues, you have to resist that temptation, and here's why. Because even those who agree with the left in the shitlibs on 95+% of the issues, they will go at you for the 5% or less that you disagree with them on. I mean, J.K. Rowling is kind of tiresome as it is to bring her up because she's in the news a lot. She was a total shitlib darling until in mid-2020 she spoke out on the trans thing. Again, for very feminist, turf, left-wing reasons. But still, it was against the trans narrative, and so she was condemned as a thought criminal at that point onward. So, I mean, it doesn't matter what you do. They're going to hate you anyways if you differ with them at all.
And that's why I'm not even for, like, yeah, to a degree, you have to hide your power level around normies.
Yeah, you gotta be smart. You gotta be smart.
But it's like, you're never going to be the good guy. Like, you're going to be the evil racist anyway. Why not just say, to a degree, what you actually believe? Like, I don't think it's wise to, start out, hey, welcome to Poll. Let me tell you about the, a certain ethno, a certain ethnic group. Like, that's probably going to immediately turn people off to whatever it is you want to say. But, you will never be welcomed by these people. So I couldn't pull out. Generally, I use archives. For whatever reason, the archive link we have in our little shared document here isn't working. So I have pulled up Reason Magazine, which, for those of you who don't know, Reason Magazine is a libertarian publication. So, Victor, you found this. I don't know if you want to explain a little bit what this is and maybe start reading it.
Let me pull this up. It was Texas A&M University. The president of that university canceled a student group's drag show. The student group is called Spectrum WT. It's an LGBT student group on campus that wanted to have a drag show. And the university president canceled it. And his reasons for that were in this. I mean, this is like Michael Tracy levels of obscurantism. I got to critique the writing. I just can't help but do that. Where it says, I will not appear to condone, in other words, I won't put up with, the diminishment of any group at the expense of impertinent gestures toward another group for any reason, even when the law of the land appears to require it. Now, what I think he was trying to say there was, I won't let a group get diminished. I think what he was saying is that the presence of a drag show queen, or whatever the hell it is, diminishes the dignity of LGBT people. As if you could diminish their dignity any further, but let's assume that's possible. He was against it on those grounds. And of course, this article, based on its narrative tone and a bunch of other shitlibs, and Fire, were against it. For those who don't know, FIRE, that's kind of like the
It's a
the
campus
college
free speech organization. And not to
and they
derail
come in
this,
handy.
and not to
Oh,
cut you
sure.
off, I just want to touch on it before we completely move on. Finray says I think J.K. Rowling is still just as bad in the comments, and I think I would agree. I would agree with that statement because, like the left, the progressives at this point in time find themselves in an instance, or people who were old school progressives, so progressives from 20 years ago, some of them are finding themselves in a place where, like, new planks, the progressive platform, are a bridge too far. Like, okay, like I can't reconcile in my mind how we can call a man a woman. Like at a certain point, the cognitive dissonance is just too much. But like J.K. Rowling and the people associated with her, these exclusionary radical feminists, or TERFs, are just as bad. They are the useful idiots that helped pave the way for this stuff to happen. Like, okay, you don't like that, trannies are now a thing. Well, this is the natural consequence of your ideology. Like, cool. Like, you are more responsible than anybody on the right for this sort of thing. You've got yourself to blame. I don't know. Maybe I'm a little more quick to condemn people, but
That could be. And Ubersoy had a good video that I put in the chat. And I mean, I have a mixed opinion of Ubersoy, but that's aside from the point. He made a good video about why J.K. Rowling is not your friend. And it is a pretty eye-opening video. So if you're right of center, and it's probably not this audience, but if you happen to stand J.K. Rowling for any particular reason,
and this is the same person too who, just to seem more woke, 20 years after she had written the books, is like trying to retcon characters into being black, or saying that they were
Hermione
gay.
was black, Dumbledore was gay, and all that nonsense. That's true.
And as an aside, I mean, I just don't really like. As a kid, yeah, the movies were kind of neat. I guess I read the books, but
I think they're very good.
I don't know. My main criticism, and perhaps this stems from, well, maybe I'll keep my mouth shut on that particular point because we are still streaming on YouTube. But the world building in Harry Potter is just not consistent at all. Like, the rules of magic make no sense. I don't know. Magic is just too overt, and this isn't a literary criticism channel, but I just don't like Harry Potter because nothing makes sense and nothing is consistent. So,
well, now you don't want to get too retentively right wing when it comes to cultural products, because I like there's a growing sensation on YouTube of small, far right of center content creators who are engaging with media and making good critiques of them. I don't want to be the kind of right winger who seems to never have fun with anything, right? You don't want to be that kind of guy where everything is terrible. There's no merit in any movies or anything like that. That's just something I want to avoid. I don't want to direct too much criticism at you, but I mean,
no, and I mean, I guess I probably take a harder stance on that because one of the people who influenced me was black-pilled Devin Stack, who, like, I mean, everything that's coming out of Hollywood is just straight propaganda, and it's really bad. But you should, I'm drawing a blank on the name of the guy that was shared in the Gilded, who is very, very good. He's got like 2,000 subs, and he's making critiques of stuff like Breaking Bad, and he had the George Carlin video. You should link that, because that was actually, I mean, it's beyond the scope of the stream, otherwise we'd watch it, but give this guy a sub. Like, his
name is Wyatt Stagg, right? That's the name of his channel, Wyatt Stagg. We're giving him a shout out. A shout out, I meant to say. He's got 2,000 some subscribers, but he's working on what matters. I linked his George Carlin video. I'll link his channel as well.
He strikes me as somebody in very much the same vein as Devin Stack, but if I do say so myself, he might be a little better at it. Not that I'm meaning to be critical of the beekeeper himself, but... And we'll actually talk about Black Build a little later on the stream as well. But yes, continue on. I didn't mean to derail this whole conversation about, drag show on college campus.
Yeah, and so the ultimate thrust of this story is that, as with the tweet we just showed, libertarians, quite regrettably, aren't entirely on our side. That's the unfortunate part. And I'm a very Big Tent person, as I've said before, all about accumulating as many allies as we can, because the left is very numerous, and we need all the power and the forces we can gather. But the sad part is there's just very unfortunate levels of daylight between what we believe and what they do. I mean, these are pure enablers of degeneracy. And then like with FIRE, right? I forget what the acronym stands for, but yes, they've come in handy in certain cases with professors that have been screwed over by shitlib academia.
In
or
the same way that the
belong
ADL
to.
used to come, or not the ADL, the ACLU.
Yes,
I don't know that
right,
the ADL has ever come in handy, but the ACLU had come in handy.
Right, yeah. I mean, but FIRE does stuff like this so they can appear nonpartisan, right? We're not partisan. We're unbiased. We're just all about academic freedom. And the sad part is you don't push the pile in any meaningful way if you're playing for both teams, is what I'm saying.
And I don't have too much more to contribute to, sort of the LOLBERT report.
That's fine. We're good. We can move on.
Just suffice to say, I think it's worth keeping tabs on what they're doing just to open people's eyes, because they have, like, I'm agnostic on the degree to which elections are real in the West. I think that there has probably been, voter fraud going on for some time. I don't know how long or to what extent. My gut feeling is that certain key precincts and certain, key voter districts and certain key states have always had, a thumb on the scale. I think it was pretty overt in the 2020 election, but suffice to say, I do believe that the Libertarian Party has stolen elections away from people who would be more ideologically aligned with us, because they want to throw their vote down the toilet and give elections to the Democrats, who are not nearly as fractious as we are.
That did kind of happen in last year, the Georgia Senate race, not the runoff, but the stage before, between Herschel Walker and the other dude.
I mean, that's what Bob Dole did. He cost, he gave
Ross Perot.
Yeah. Ross Perot cost Bob Dole the election and gave it to Bill Clinton.
That was 92 against H.W. Bush, more specifically. He did also do that in 96 against Bob Dole, but to a far greater degree in 92 against H.W. And he wasn't a libertarian, he was an independent, but that's
emblematic of a larger issue. And I don't want to be, I'm pretty big tent myself, and I don't want to be too openly critical. And that's where you won't really see me personally punch right too often, because we have so few allies, and there's a lot I'm willing to accept. If you're 90% on my side and we disagree on, certain things, like whether or not we should try and reinstitute the position of dictator, speaking specifically of Leather Apron Club, I'm probably not going to say too much about you, and I think we need to all adopt that same mentality, because it's like, okay, well, I mean, do you really want to waste all this time and energy going after somebody because, they don't believe 100% the same thing as you do? Like, you believe that they're wrong about gays being the homo sex? Or do you want to go after, people who are actively trying to, what did I say?
You said gays being the homo sex, which I'm sure know is redundant.
Yeah, Greeks being the homo sex. They both start with a G, but I suppose I've got to read all the way to the end. I don't know that we ought to be wasting all this time and energy infighting because somebody isn't, ideologically pure, when there are people out there who literally want to import hordes of third world migrants, and they want people like us dead. And we are in, it's all well and good to argue about the color of the curtains, but the house is on fire. So we will keep tabs on libertarians going forward. So just like we will keep tabs on if I can get OBS to transition here, the alt-right. So speaking of Devin Stack, we'll just segue now. He was given his Twitter account back, which something that really, really surprised me. So
that's a big deal. And if I could show myself, which I won't, I have the Trump hands of, big deal. I'm waving the hands around. I got the index finger up while the other ones are tucked.
And so here's what I want to point out for those of you who don't know. I have followed Devin Stack probably 6 or 7 times now, and I keep getting unfollowed, and this keeps happening to him. He keeps, he'll spike up. I've seen him up to as high as 1,000, and then his subscriber or his follower count keeps getting nuked back down. So I don't know what's up with that. But to sort of spring off of the comment that I saw come through from Modelo Bags 51, he says, I'm unable to understand how Nick Fuentes is way more popular than Blackpilled. I suspect it's because Nick Fuentes is on some level being astroturfed by the powers that be. And also he happens to be, you know, young, not bad looking and charismatic. But you're right. Blackpilled was making way better content for way longer. I think the issue here is Devin Stack is like, he's a little autistic with certain things. Like, he will refuse to... So, he was never banned off of YouTube. And in fact, to my knowledge, all of his content is still up. He just one day stopped posting stuff on YouTube because he wanted to take a hard ideological line against using the platform of his enemies, which it's like, okay, cool, but now you've relegated yourself to... He was on a couple of different platforms. He was on Trovo for a while. Lately, he streams on mostly Odyssey. And he's still worth a listen. Like, I respect the hell out of the guy. I like him a lot. But he did that to himself. He kneecapped himself by being unwilling to use the platforms of his adversaries. He was even saying on Gab, too. He's like, well, I'm not sure if I'm going to go back to Twitter because Twitter is the big gay. It's like, okay, well, enjoy your echo chamber. Like, the people who need to hear you are not here on Gab. The people who need to hear you are not on Rumble or Odyssey or BitChute. Like, the people who need to hear you are on YouTube. Like, this is the audience you need to reach, especially with his, like, level of proficiency and skill with video editing and doing that sort of stuff. That's a powerful tool, you know, for the alt-right, and he has a way of breaking things down in a way that's easily understood. And I think he was very important in pointing out just exactly how degenerate modern Hollywood is, but it's like, I think his relative obscurity is his own fault. And some of, like, on stream now, he's gotten... I hesitate to use the term contemptuous, but it seems like he's got a certain degree of disdain for his regular viewers. Like, he'll do things to intentionally annoy them. Like, if they complain that the audio is too loud on something, he'll crank it up even higher. Like, he just wants to talk about homesteading and bees and stuff like that, which is mildly interesting, but that's not why, you know, people are listening to you. But then on the other hand, he'll go and make, like, a multi-part series... He'll go and make a multi-part series on something like Waco and Ruby Ridge that is just very good. To my, like, it's the best thing I have seen on the subject. So I wish he would just stop being so really prideful. I wish he'd stop being so prideful and continue to post stuff on YouTube. Like, if it were me, I would just continue to ban evade. Like, it's not that hard. Even if he got his channel nuked, like, oh well, he's not drawing much in the way of a revenue stream from it right now. But
so now, I want you to clarify something for me. Is this channel? This is a BitChute channel, called Blackpilled. Is this guy the same as Devin Stack?
Yes, Devin Stack.
Does he sound like Norm Macdonald? Kind of has a Norm Macdonald.
I guess I don't
voice.
know what Norm Macdonald really sounds like, but he does have a deeper voice.
Okay. I'll find a video so you can play it, so we know we're talking about the same guy. It's too bad you don't know what he sounds like. I don't know.
Well, I mean,
living
it's
under
hard
a rock
for me to, like, I don't know what you want me. Should I, like, try and mimic his voice? With Blackpilled, I'm Devin Stack. Good afternoon, good evening, good night.
Okay, so maybe not. I'll find a video.
Well, I think that was just a really poor impression.
that could have been. We all have our gifts. Maybe it's more my wheelhouse to be Mr. Impression Guy, just to self-aggrandize. Dang it, why isn't this video? Okay. I'll send it to you.
Yeah, just
then maybe decide this.
Either Gilded or Skype works, but I guess I'm looking at Gilded
I'll send
right
it
now.
over Gilded.
Yeah.
And
BitChute isn't going to work with Watch Together, but he's still on YouTube. He is still on YouTube. I can just pull it up right now.
Okay, yeah, do that. So then we'll decide whether he sounds like Norm Macdonald.
Well, while I'm doing that, maybe... Well, it shouldn't take me too long. Build.
Let's do a vote, guys. Does Devin Stack sound like Norm Macdonald? One in the chat if he does.
Here. This is
How many times have people told you that the media being owned by a select
Got a
few
Manhattan
isn't a
accent,
problem?
says Jimmy John.
here. Let me actually put this in the watch together. I kind of screwed that up.
I know not the significance of that, Jimmy John. I'm sorry to say. I'm not a New Yorker, as I'm sure you can tell.
The playlist. Let me play it.
I got some guinea.
How many
blooded
times have people told you that the media being owned by a select few isn't
Okay,
a
it's not
problem?
him.
That these corporations
Yeah.
It must be a different black pill, believe it or not.
I mean, if you're not familiar with Black Pill, I mean, he is sort of essential. He's canon for the alt-right. You know, he does. I don't know. He strikes me as closer to a midwit. I don't think he's like as autistically intelligent as somebody like Ryan Falk, but that's honestly an asset. Like,
Yeah, being neurotypical is an advantage. Not sounding like a spur is an asset.
well, and we can talk about, since you brought him up, and we are on the alt-right report.
Yes.
We can talk about Nick Fuentes and his autistic Catholicism. And again, I'm not looking to punch right too often, but
In before.
yeah, in before I start punching right. No, like I just sort of take issue with anyone who's not looking to be big, like they want to be exclusionary, and I don't want to misquote him, but I do believe he said something to the effect of "new ethno-state is going to be a Catholic theocracy." Like, you're an idiot,
Yeah.
dude.
Yeah,
Like,
the cringe LARP bullcrap like that rubs me the wrong way.
are Catholics even? Oops.
Are they what?
I'm wondering what percentage of the American population is even Catholic.
Oh, it's like 25%. 51% Protestant, like 24, 25% Catholic, last time I checked.
Yeah, 22% of the U.S. population, according to Wikipedia.
Okay, it's probably it's probably changed over the years since I last checked.
But that's one of those things where it's like, I don't know. I almost wonder if he's intentionally there to sort of foment discord on the dissident right. Like, I don't know how you can seriously be like Roman Catholicism is the solution, or at least as hard as he's doubling down on that point. Like, I've got no real issue with Catholics. I do have some issues with Catholic theology and the Catholic Church, in particular the papacy and a lot of the degeneracy that's getting pushed with that sort of thing. And you can even go back to things like what they did to Jan Hus and what they tried to do to Martin Luther, and all the different wars in Europe and the sale of indulgences. Like, we can delve into that, but then you can make the argument of, well, at that point in time, the Catholic Church was more of a political institution, and the way that people were appointed was not necessarily through that. Like, we can go into a rabbit hole on that one, but that stuff just drives me up a freaking wall. Like, and I just want to touch on it too while I'm sort of thinking of it. Like, there's a lot, especially on Poll, they'll post about, the based Orthodox Church. Like, as somebody who just so happened to grow up Orthodox, as I was a convert when I was a very little kid, but the majority of my life was spent as an Orthodox Christian. I can promise you they are no different, at least here in the United States. Like, they are not any more based. There were Orthodox bishops marching with BLM. I mean, Mike Heimbach.
Matt Heimbach?
Matt Heimbach was excommunicated from the Orthodox Church because he espoused views that were white nationalist in nature. Like, they are not on your side just because they look a little more trad, just because they grow scraggly beards. And, like, incidentally, certain population sets, like the Russian Orthodox Church in particular, are going to be a little more based than your average population. I suspect largely because a lot of them came to the United States, fleeing the Soviet Union and, the Iron, trying to get out from behind the Iron Curtain and all that stuff. So, but don't like convert to Orthodoxy because you think that it's based. Like, I encourage people to, do their research and try to edify themselves on certain subjects, especially theological subjects, and try to put together a coherent worldview. Like, understand what the Orthodox Church believes and why before you want to jump into that into that sphere, because I can promise you, like, if you were to espouse those views, you would be in an absolute minority. If you don't end yourself up in hot water, you would likely end up excommunicated if you're unrepentant. With that sort of thing. And I watched people growing up too, like, try to virtue signal by adopting the black kids from, well, obviously from Africa, just like they do in sort of the woke churches. Like, I don't know. I mean, everything's kind of screwed right now.
Is the Orthodox Church as bad as, like, Methodists or Presbyterians? Or
no, I wouldn't go that far.
Yeah, I mean,
I wouldn't go that far. I would say they're probably, like, something closer to a 60-40 or 70-30, conservative, and I'm talking boomer con to liberal mixture. Like, they are probably more conservative on aggregate, but that doesn't mean they're based. And they have their own, like, the priesthood is very left-leaning, especially as you start getting, climbing up the ladder more and more. And you got to remember, too, especially in the United States, a large number of Orthodox churches are ethnic, despite what they want to tell you. Like, they'll say, well, they're not exclusively, they're exclusively ethnic. Like, you'll have people come up to you and be like, what are you doing here if you're at a Greek Orthodox church and you don't speak Greek? I'm not saying that's everywhere, but I have personally experienced that. So
that's funny.
But yeah, I mean, and a lot of these ethnicities, I don't know why I'm having such a hard time tonight.
Stop drinking.
I promise I am 100% sober, unfortunately.
No, it's better if you pretend you're drunk now.
Yeah,
okay?
Yeah, there we go. I'm just a raging alcoholic. Like, a lot of these ethnicities are non-white. So, like there are a lot of Arabs, Lebanese, things like that. So, and they're absolutely
and Armenians too.
Yeah,
whatever.
Absolutely
that right.
Even though they're not in union with, like, what we would consider to be the Orthodox Church, like the Coptics, the Ethiopians are another one that are not. Like, don't fall for the poll meme. Like, do your research. Just understand that the church, unfortunately, is an institution comprised of men, and men are fallible. And therefore, if there is widespread rot and degeneracy, it's going to seep into the churches as well. So I think you are better off trying to find, a local church and community and build up from there, rather than, like, trying to think that if you graft orthodoxy onto the United States, it's going to somehow solve our problems. Like, you're not going to find a church. Believe me, I've looked. You're not going to find a base church out there unless you're, like, finding some 1 in a million non-denominational church, like the Westboro Baptists. I'm not even saying they're entirely based. I wasn't a huge fan of what they were doing at, the funerals of soldiers, but stuff like that. Just be cautious. That's a long-winded way of saying be cautious with that sort of thing. If it seems based, it's probably too good to be true.
That's entirely possible, of course. I want to segue into the NEOCON report.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll even do the old transition NEOCON report.
Yeah.
There you go.
Bring it on.
And I'm not sure which one you would like to start with. I suppose we can start with Bill Kristol.
Yeah, so it's a debate from October 2021, and funnily enough, it's Reason TV did Soho Forum. They like to host debates, and I guess that's a perk of libertarianism, is they're all about free speech and debating of stuff. But this one is the very classic neocon, Bill Kristol of The Bulwark, debating Scott Horton of antiwar.com. Some of you might know Scott Horton. He does lots of anti-war commentary, and he has a lot to say about the Ukraine war. You have the timestamp to go to, right, Jim?
Yeah, I can pull it up.
Yeah, and so objectively, if for those who haven't watched the debate, I'm not saying this just because I hate Bill Kristol for being the piece of crap he is. Like, this is a literal. Is it normative or positive? This is a literal fact that Bill Kristol got destroyed in this debate. Like, I'm not even lying when I say I could have done a better job than Bill Kristol did, because I have enough residual momentum from when I was a neocon, a lot more hawkish, and Jim had that era in his life as well. I have a lot just more convincing information in my mind from those days that I could have presented and made a better case against Scott Horton. But Bill Kristol absolutely sucked, and the poll results of the debate show that.
before we start, I just want to address a couple of comments here too.
Sure.
Modelo Bag says he hasn't been on Twitter in years. I mean, the platform is better, and I think that the algorithm works. Like, I pretty much only see based content on there. Like, there are people openly talking about the JQ on Twitter, so again, there are still people getting banned off of Twitter for being too far to the right, but it's a lot better than it was. And again, my issue with sort of these parallel websites that we try and put together is the right is so fractious that we can't unify behind one. We've got Gab, we've got Truth, we've got 100 different other ones, and so like none of them are a viable alternative, and so we just end up in these weird echo chambers that don't actually challenge, you know, something like the hegemony of Twitter and Facebook. So I'm personally on Twitter. I don't use it a ton, but I think it's worthwhile. That's where I would go, especially if you're looking to push stuff out to the normies. Yeah, it taught me Jimmy John says, in reference to Black Pilled, who's got a Manhattan accent, his stuff is fantastic, taught me a lot about African honeybees. Like, it's a good analogy for, like, you know, certain dysgenic things, but I guess maybe it's my own personal bias. I just don't really care about honeybees. I mean, I think his homesteading stuff is cool. I think that might be worth a mention here or there, or even, you know, some content on, okay, here's what I learned from, you know, my homesteading process. But I don't know. For me, it's just too much. Finray says, but a lot of those Catholics, but would a lot of those Catholics not be white but Hispanic? Well, that's the problem too, is like these people have a sympathy towards, again, there's the classic example of, I'd rather have my daughter marry a black Christian than a white atheist, like the eternal Christ cuck in that regard. And I don't really like that term. I don't use it lightly, but like that's a very cucky point of view to take. And that's especially Catholics, like, they are very much about importing more Catholics here. And a lot of the Catholics are not white. Like, they're not people who are compatible with society here in the United States. I mean, it'd be one thing, like, I've got no problem with Spanish and French Catholics coming over here. Like, I don't have an issue with Catholics to that degree, but
odds are they actually have more issue with you. Like, I notice, and I wish this wasn't the case, but Catholics really have a bug up their butt about Protestants, which seems intuitive, but it's like, dude, I never did anything against you. Why are you so swiftly condemning towards me?
Well, and it's like, I don't know how you justify a lot of the stuff that went on in the Catholic Church, especially even if it's overhyped. Like, I've seen stuff, and I'm not sure one way or the other if it's true or not, that says really, you know, teachers molest people at a higher incidence rate than priests. So, not that I'm like justifying, you know, molestation.
But I mean, stuff like, just in history, there was Pope Julius II? He was the warrior pope, right? Acting like a prince. That doesn't.
Or the cadaver synod, wherein one pope put the cadaver of another pope on trial for being dumb and stupid.
Oh God, I didn't know about that. Or Pope Alexander VI, a total degenerate bastard.
But they do have their moments too. Like, I shared it in the Gilded, and if you're not in there, ask for the link and I'll give it to you. But you know, crusading as an act of love, it was written by a prominent crusade historian, pre-historical revisionism, but it was written by a prominent historian on the Crusades that really goes into some depth and detail about why crusading was really an act of brotherly love. Like, I am very pro-Crusades. I think that was a good thing for, you know, Urban II and his successors to do and call for. So they're capable of doing based things, but that doesn't mean we shouldn't call them out for the bad things and the theological issues I have with them as well. Modelo Bags says, I was just going to ask about Russian Orthodox, specifically since they're the head of the religion is located in Russia, which seems to be anti-degeneracy. I think that's probably more a product of the fact that they're in Russia, they're in Eastern Europe, than the fact that they're Russian Orthodox. Having said that, a lot of the Russian Orthodox that I have personally interacted with don't speak a whole lot of English, so I guess I can't really say. So, but I wouldn't anticipate that they're going to be super based. Like, don't get that out of your head right now. Like, understand that Orthodoxy is also a very mystical sect of Christianity. So if that's your thing, then you might be interested in it. And there's a lot of value that comes out of Orthodoxy. I think that there is very real value in having sort of a pastoral father. I take issue with the idea that you have to go to the sacrament of confession, but I think it's a worthwhile thing to sort of have somebody who functions as almost a guide for your life. Or the idea of fasting. I think they take it to the extreme. If you were to follow the Orthodox monastic calendar, you will be fasting more days than you are not fasting in the calendar year. But there is something valuable about self-discipline and stuff like that. And I don't want to derail this too
I was
far,
about to say some of the viewership was dropping, and I was like, might want to. Oh, look, could spin towards the video perhaps.
So, all right, continuing on.
Muslims. Our intervention in Iraq and Afghanistan was on behalf of Muslims, and our departure from Afghanistan has unfortunately left many decent people in Afghanistan who worked with us, but more importantly, worked for themselves and enjoyed the relative freedom of the last 20 years, now worrying that they may never have a chance at that again. I hope we can do it diplomatically, help get decent people out who've worked with us. That's our moral obligation. And I also hope we can diplomatically perhaps help work for an outcome there that's less bad than, unfortunately, the outcome looks like it might be. But that's, again, where I think our intervention, both diplomatic, economic, as well as, if need be, occasionally military, is so important around the world. But just, again, the notion that, Australia may have foolish COVID protocols now, and people can chortle about how that's like totalitarianism, but that's ludicrous, honestly. And a discourse that can talk about a U.S. Holocaust and about authoritarian, I'm not sure what term was used, so I don't want to characterize it, but talk about Australia even in a semi-joking way, in the same way one talks about genuine dictatorships that kill dissidents and really oppress minorities in horrible ways. People who can talk cavalierly about that, I don't know what to say.
Next question.
I don't get to answer.
Well, Jimmy, what?
Yeah,
Okay.
on trivializing the Holocaust, our
Did you call him Jimmy?
Yeah, I don't know where that came from.
government,
There's no one named Jimmy here.
led by the neoconservative hawks, call every opponent of the American government Hitler. Noriega's Hitler, David Koresh's Hitler, Saddam Hussein is Hitler, the Ayatollah Khomeini and Khamenei are Hitler. In fact, just 6 weeks ago, H.R. McMaster said that for Trump to have negotiated.
And that's part of what we were talking about earlier, where the boomer con right wing wants to virtue signal. I mean, Hitler is the ultimate evil. So says the left, and if we characterize other people who are ideologically unpure as Hitler, we're going to win brownie points, and maybe we will stop facing such social ostracism from people on the left. So,
Negotiated with the Taliban, that's just like Neville Chamberlain negotiating with Hitler. Well, that to me sounds like it's trivializing the Holocaust. Either Hitler was a unique danger or he wasn't. And I would say that he was. And I would say that when they bring up Adolf Hitler,
even him, he wants to virtue signal. He wants to say it was a unique danger.
Right.
exception that proves the rule in every single case where America has to intervene. Oh, Muammar Gaddafi, the guy from the Naked Gun too? Yeah, no, we got to get him too. He's Hitler too. They're all Hitler. Speaking of trivializing the Holocaust.
Comment, Bill? No. You want to pass? You want to pass?
No.
Okay, you want to pass. Question.
No answer.
That's just embarrassing. I don't know how you
Yes.
wouldn't. Like, you have nothing to say to that
Nothing
point.
to say.
I
Call
guess that's
yourself-
marginally better than opening your mouth and sounding like a complete retard, but
Yeah, as the old quote, better to be thought a fool than to open your mouth and remove all doubt.
right.
But, like, I mean, just no answer. You call yourself an intellectual, right? He graduated from college. He got some kind of degree. I think he even has a doctorate in foreign relations, whatever. You're editor-in-chief of the Bulwark, right? Supposedly a publication of news. and you just have nothing to say in response to that. I mean, that is a cringy level of intellectual mediocrity.
It seems that empires don't last.
Question.
So that's past the clip that I allotted.
Okay, I wasn't sure how much of it. Okay, yeah, 1/3.
Yeah, people can, and the term I meant to say earlier on between normative and positive. Normative means something is opinion based. Positive is testable and empirical. So I mean to say positively, Bill Kristol got destroyed in this debate. And again, I'm not like as obnoxiously anti-war necessarily as some are, but like, I mean, again, I could have done better than Bill Kristol in this debate. It was very, very pitiful to watch.
So we're going to run into an issue with the remainder of our NEOCON report here where the archives aren't working. So do you have the unarchived versions that I can...
Yes, here, I'll link it for you. I will give it to you. 1 second, good sir. And we don't have to get into the thick of the article, but you can like show the Control F for the highlighted portions. Because the main punchline here is back in mid-February, the Bulwark had sort of a write-up of a conversation between Kathy Young, Natan Sharansky, and Bernard Henry Levy. And those who are more attuned to the coding of names might pick up that all three of them are in fact not Gentiles like you and I, which is interesting. So it's emblematic to me of how this whole Ukraine-Russia thing tends to break down, where look who is on the pro-Ukraine side. Now, that's not indicative completely of what side you should take, but it is strange to me, or it should have been strange to me back when I was more pro-Ukraine a year ago, because I really hated tankies and the anti-imperialist left. That's what animated my support for Ukraine back then. But like, who is on the pro-Ukraine side? Like, just all the worst shitlibs in the world, and all the worst globalist sacks of shit in the World Economic Forum, and just all the most appalling people are on the pro-Ukraine side. And so then you take this, and we all try to do our part to fight off Zog and whatnot. And then again, these people are the ones on the side of Ukraine. So it's like, and then you take in the fact that Zelensky is also not a Gentile like you and I. And then there's other articles I've read too, some from the Occidental Observer, about the Semitic influence that some oligarchs have in the shaping of Ukraine. So I mean, there's a lot to get into there. That's not entirely the point.
Well, and here's the thing too, is like, they want to talk about, like, the Holocaust is brought up a lot, or any genocide, but if you want to justify doing a terrible act, like committing a truly heinous act against a group of people, you have to dehumanize them. You have to put it out there and believe in your mind that if you don't do this terrible thing, they will do something even worse to you, or they have done something even worse to you. Like, look at how the army of the Russian Federation, which, mind you, is largely made up of conscripts. Like, this is not a volunteer army. These are people who are largely forced to be here. He characterizes them as an army of war criminals on the whole. And I guarantee you, like, I forget which international organization it was that issued an arrest warrant for Vladimir Putin. I guarantee you, if given the ability, they would do Nuremberg Part 2 Electric Boogaloo to, you know, people involved.
Chomping at the bit. You'd better believe it.
Like, they are out there to justify doing terrible things to these people. So, and I'm not trying to, like, I find myself thrust into the position of being pro-Russian in this particular instance because I just don't understand how anyone can support what has been going on with NATO, the United States, and Ukraine. And its characterization, like, okay, even if this invasion is not justified, I can't think of a singular nation that has not fought a war over territory. That used to be the norm. I mean, good Lord, how many wars were fought specifically over the Alsace-Lorraine, like, in Europe? You know what I mean? Like, this is what, especially in the Napoleonic era, this is what nations do. There was another war in Crimea, you know?
Right, yeah. Or what was, you know, would you argue that Israel's wars are territorial wars, like the Six-Day War?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
Or what was another example I was trying to think of?
The Yom Kippur War.
Yeah, that one too. And the invasion of Lebanon in 2006 they did in the summer. But there was another one in my mind too that was like kind of recent but also territorial. But it's like, yeah, I mean it's what you expect from a war.
So, and we can go ahead and say that, okay, well, this is not a thing that we as an international community are cool with anymore, and we can have that discussion, right? But to characterize a group of people or a nation as being, literally Hitler, an army of war criminals, by virtue, because they have done something that every nation on the face of the planet has done repeatedly, like, I don't understand how you get there. But, as Levy himself noted, there are no angels, especially in war. But, I mean, that's not really hedging what you've said here. I don't know. I
mean, he kind of did, because he knows that there's accusations you can make against Ukraine and the hijinks they've been up to. Like, in the article I just sent you, where Amnesty International controversially made their assessment about Ukraine using human shields and endangering civilians during combat that way. Oh, there's also
that was my main criticism as well of people, who are going after the Russians because, a school got hit or a hospital got hit or an apartment building got hit. It's like, okay, well, you, the Ukrainian army, are supposed to be defending these people, and you have actively chosen to entrench yourself in and among the civilian population. Like, I don't know what you anticipate is going to happen. Like, they don't have the perfect weapon to just press an off button and kill you. Like, especially if it's some sort of counter battery fire. Like, I mean, if you're trying to find somebody using radio direction finding, there's only so precise you can really get, especially with imprecise munitions.
And there's also something from the Washington Post that alluded to human shields. It was pretty early on in the war. I'm surprised that such an article was written.
We have a documented pattern of Ukrainian forces putting civilians at risk and violating the laws of war when they operate in populated areas. Yeah, and I mean, I guess counterpoint that's like, well, how do you defend a city if you're not willing to entrench in said city? So don't get mad at the Russians because you have chosen the ground on which you fight. Like, if you had been in an open field somewhere or a forest somewhere, they would be attacking you there. Like, there is no active policy among the armed forces of the Russian Federation to target the civilian population of Ukraine. There would be no point. There'd be no point because it's not like the economy of Ukraine is perpetuating this war. It's the economy of the West. It's the economy of NATO. Like, that's the reason they're still in this fight right now, is the munitions supplied by the United States in particular.
And then I just wanted you to read an excerpt from a Washington Post article as well from late March 2022. It makes me cringe because it's not archived, but apparently there's no other way it can be done.
Oh my God. Well, I can't even read it.
Oh, you can't? Does it not?
No, because I'd have to sign up for access.
Oh, damn it. Oh, God, there's got to be something.
I don't know why the archive isn't working. You want to try posting it in... posting the archive link in Gilded, and I can try it that way. This is bizarre. I've never had an issue before.
I did post it in Gilded.
Oh yeah, it didn't work.
Above. Yeah.
So
that's too bad.
I suppose you can just read whatever it is. People are listening. So
yeah, I'll post the archive link in the chat for what matters, and then the quote itself. If you click on the archived article and then just Control F, it's William Shabbos, an international law professor at Middlesex University in London, said, "I'm very reluctant to suggest that Ukraine is responsible for civilian casualties because Ukraine is fighting to defend its country from an aggressor. But to the extent that Ukraine brings the battlefield to the civilian neighborhoods, it increases the danger to civilians. But Ukraine's strategy, and this is not quoting him, but this is the article itself, but Ukraine's strategy of placing heavy military equipment and other fortifications in civilian zones could weaken Western and Ukrainian efforts to hold Russia legally culpable for possible war crimes," said human rights activists and international humanitarian law experts. So I love how it's framed, where the fact that they do human shielding, they're not concerned necessarily that Ukraine is doing something in violation of international law. It's like, man, we won't be able to get Russia as badly now. We won't be as credible when we try to take on Russia. That's their concern.
Yeah, I mean, these people are just disgusting. And again, the fact that they're not even willing to come to the negotiating table with the Russian Federation and they want to keep perpetuating this war, which has had a measurable impact already on Ukrainian demographics, like, is just sickening. Like, even if they've fled the country, you know good and well they're never coming back. Like,
Yeah, why would they go back?
I think we're going to skip Kathy Young's articles in the interest of
Oh,
time,
yeah,
and because
yeah. No,
they're
we-
several years old at this point. I mean, I already highlighted the relevant section from her Wikipedia page, but suffice to say, she is the type of person that is supporting Ukraine. So,
Oh, and Natan Sharansky, I just wanted to quickly say about him. This is an article from Time Magazine, January 2005. I'll put the archive link in the what the hell? Why is it that URL? Okay, I put the wrong link in my Word doc. But the point is, Natan Sharansky wrote The Case for Democracy, which was an inspiration for George W. Bush to pursue the war in Iraq, or the general foreign policy towards the East. So that's what he has on his hands and on his head when he starts crowing about how Russia is terrible and full of war criminals. It's like, dude, the stuff that you are motivated by is reprehensible in its own right.
all right, moving on to the SH TLIB Report. So there are just a few articles I pulled from this week, like federal judge blocks Tennessee laws restricting drag shows. If I can open it here. Come on. There we go. So, the duly elected government in Tennessee has attempted to restrict the access of, degenerates who want to strip dance in front of children to children, and this is the response of the courts. And I'm working on sort of a video of, where we need to go from here, what the next republic needs to look like, what our next government needs to look like. And this is one of the problems with the United States. This is how the United States has been so subverted, is there is virtually no oversight or no repercussions for, U.S. district judges and Supreme Court justices and all these people who want to legislate from the bench like this, who don't want to actually enforce and uphold the law. They just want to make up whatever they feel is morally right, morally righteous. And it's largely from the bench that, the United States has become subverted. It's, U.S. v. Wong Kim Ark that solidifies what we commonly understand as birthright citizenship here in the United States, that has just granted blanket citizenship to any baby that happens to be born in the United States, regardless of whether or not they actually are subject to the jurisdiction thereof, in reference to the United States. As it says in the 14th Amendment itself. It's Obergefell v. Hodges that brings gay marriage to the United States, not an act of legislation. It's Roe v. Wade that brings abortion into the United States, not any act of legislation.
Yeah, that's kind of sus. That's kind of interesting.
Well, and I don't have a good solution, right? Like, I don't know what needs to be done here. I'm not claiming to have the answer, because you need to have judges and they need to be able to operate independently without worrying about re-election or being easily removed from office. But like, something very clearly needs to be done here, and I'm looking to foster some discussion on that point. Like, we need to curtail and rein in the courts in the United States, because they are way too powerful. They can just do whatever they want. And I mean, yeah, you can say, well, the courts make noise. They can make whatever ruling they want. It's up to the executive branch to enforce it, and to a lesser extent the legislative branch. But that's not how it has operated largely, or at least certainly not in our favor.
Yeah,
but
the term is critarchy for being ruled by judges. Yeah, critarchy. Thank you, Jimmy John. Yeah, that's exactly right.
So, or look at the Troon HHS secretary is optimistic that child sex change procedures will soon be normalized. Not just sex change procedures. Child sex change procedures will be normalized.
Wait, I thought that wasn't happening.
gender affirming care, a euphemism for puberty blockers, hormone injections.
Yes.
Like, this is the picture of mental health. This is the person who should be our HHS secretary, right? Rachel Levine. Levine.
Yeah. No, yeah. I mean,
and if I knew what this dude's actual name was, I would use it. I'm just going off of the caption. I can't be arsed to look this person up on Wikipedia to intentionally dead name them.
I'll look it up. We'll make it happen. Let's see. Born Levine doesn't even give his original name. I can't.
Probably to stop evil people like us, right?
Exactly. You wouldn't want to give us too much power. Words are violent, don't you know? Now,
I think the next 2 years are going to be challenging, Levine continued, but I am positive and optimistic and hopeful that the wheel will turn after that and that this issue won't be as politically and socially such a minefield. Just let us diddle kids. There's that meme that floats around from Oron McIntyre where it's not rocket science, they just want to diddle kids. Like, that is absolutely the case. Like, these people are sick. And that's the thing, too, is the question shouldn't be whether or not children are allowed to attend drag shows. The question should be why these people want access to children.
Yeah, why are they so obsessed with having drag queens read to children? Like, why is it so damn emphasized and important to them?
But were you able to find
we know the answer.
His real name or no?
No,
it's not terribly important. I truly don't care.
No, but I did want to say, if we're on the topic of shit libs, I mean, it's kind of a boomer thing to say, those liberals are mentally ill. But I'm willing to go as far as to say it's the difference between the grug part of the IQ distribution and the super smart edge of the IQ distribution, where, like, people on the left, particularly shit libs, have to be mentally warped in some way. Like, there's something mentally problematic. There's the Pew poll from 2020 that Pew has scrubbed on their own website, but was cited by Jonathan Haidt in the Free Press recently, where 50% of leftist women have at some point been diagnosed with a mental illness, right? So I mean, there's one scrap of evidence pointing towards that. But, like, scroll up for us. Scroll back up to our good friend Levine, where
which one here?
Where
to go? Here we go.
What? So if you take a look at Comrade Levine right there. Now, if your brain is working properly, you'll look at that and you go, something is a little off there. Something either looks uncanny or something looks out of place. But if you're a shit lib, then either you've been programmed socially, it's some kind of socialization process, over-socialization, as an unnamed bomber from the 90s would say, or your brain is just off, right? There's that article from a while back where if you disable certain parts of your brain, it makes you less racist. Wow,
and that's the thing, too, and that sort of segues into this next article, is shit libs have to, by nature, by virtue of the fact that they're adherents of their own, like, ideology that is not in touch with reality, they have to deny reality, and that has got to be causal, or at least a causal factor in some of the mental ailments that are very prevalent in their population. Like, The Guardian is releasing an article that says, the weaker sex, science shows that women are stronger than men. This is patently false, not only by our own observation. And, like, I have heard from women, too, who have, like, seen one too many action movies wherein women are just kicking everyone's asses. And when they're confronted with the concrete reality, like, if they ever, like, they're wrestling around with an adult male, they are taken aback at just how strong the weakest of men are, and that's because we're a sexually dimorphic species. Like, and I'm not just making this up. I'm not, like, just denying reality because I don't like it, because I don't like The Guardian. Like, here is really a liberal institution. Princeton University is saying concretely, in APSA, for instance, reported that the upper body strength of women averaged 60 to 70%, and that's high. Usually the number I see is around 50. That of men relative to body weight. Like, men are roughly twice as strong as women, and they have to deny that. They have to deny any biological inequality because of the ramifications of that. Everybody has to be equal.
Well, no, here's the funny thing. Like, read the headline, word for word.
The weaker sex, science shows that women are stronger than men.
Well, hold on, I thought we were equal. What the fuck was that about?
Right, well, some animals are more equal than others, don't you know?
Exactly, yeah. So, I made, well, I don't think I made a video. I intended to, a video about the when we're talking about equality between men and women, and this is a point that's well understood to whoever's listening, that when they're talking about equality, they're not talking about suicide rates or homelessness rates or victims of violent crime or whatever. They just want to be equal when it comes to all the good things and perhaps a little better. This is a point that Douglas Murray made in his book, The Madness of Crowds, where he quoted someone in there who said that maybe the Lehman brothers wouldn't have failed if they were the Lehman sisters, right? So it's very strange how they hold those two thoughts in their mind. I think they do it because there's this general notion that you need to curb any idea of male superiority. Equality is one way of doing that. If you say you're equal, well, then that reduces the so-called superiority gap that men have over women. But then if you say women are stronger than men, that accomplishes the same goal, because you're still degrading the notion that men are stronger than women, right? There's two ways to go about it. You could say, men are stronger, they're the same, or women are stronger. And the latter two are alternate approaches to the first approach, if that makes any sense.
Right.
The end goal is, men aren't stronger. And in order to realize an egalitarian dream, you have to deny facts like that. I mean, just to segue a little bit.
Just look at the image. I don't know many women who actually could pick up a full-grown adult man.
Well, I mean, try to zoom in on the guy there. Like, what does he look like?
Boy, my let's see, how do I zoom in? Probably right here, right? Yeah, there we go. I mean, he's got a receding hairline, that's for certain.
Right. I mean,
did they Photoshop tattoos on him? Those don't look
I know
real.
Something seems a little inauthentic about that. Maybe the whole guy is photoshopped.
Yeah, well, I
that would
mean,
explain it.
Very clearly, it does not look like she's bearing any load here. Like, just look at the way her hips are positioned. Like, I don't know. Maybe that's just me, but I would have to position myself in a different way if I were actively carrying an adult human male.
Or maybe it's a very detailed mannequin just filled with packing peanuts.
Yeah. So sort of moving on to something that's actually disconcerting for those of us meme lords. So I hadn't heard of this guy, Douglas Mackey, of West Palm Beach, Florida, but he was convicted, and he's looking at potentially a dime in a federal penitentiary, 10 years, he's a self-styled far-right propagandist, which I'm sure is a charitable characterization. But he could face up to 10 years in prison for a meme that he made. And maybe I'll just Google the meme, but they got him for, it was like voter suppression, or like election interference or something like that because of this meme right here. This is what he made. A meme that says, avoid the line, vote from home, text Hillary to 59925. Sort of, implying that you could vote by phone. And apparently 5,000 loyal Democrat voters went ahead and did that instead of voting, which is like, I don't know, man. That's Darwinism in action. Like, if you're that freaking stupid, like, you kind of deserve what you get. But really, for a meme, like for really free speech. And I want to see if this quote is actually in this article, because I want to say that it was either the prosecutor or the judge. U.S. attorney said in a release that the jury rejected Mackey's cynical attempt to use the First Amendment free speech protections to shield himself from criminal liability for a voter suppression scheme. So making a meme that is too dank, that preys on stupid people, is now a voter suppression scheme. But far be it from the federal government to actually investigate the numerous accusations of very real voter fraud or election fraud that was occurring in 2020 and prior to that point. They will straight up
We don't want to get banned. Don't want to get banned, son. We get show it if you bring up too much of that.
Yeah, I
better settle down, friend.
Probably better shy away from that point of discussion, but
I disavow. Okay, don't get on me, ADL. Jim Dewey is an evil guy. I'm not with him.
One day I hope to have my own. I'll know I've made it when I've got an entry on the ADL's website.
Or the SPLC.
Yeah, one of the two. I would be satisfied with either one.
It vaguely reminds me the idea of a cynical usage of the First Amendment. It's like, remember, or maybe you don't remember because we weren't alive at that time, but the whole point of the People versus Larry Flint and whatnot was that porn was excused on free speech grounds. Now, we could interpret that, I think is within our right, to interpret the idea of using the First Amendment to protect rank degeneracy is cynical, right? That the people propagating this pornographic bullshit are degenerates, and I believe a lot of what they do has no place in society. But they were cynically using the First Amendment to shield their degeneracy, right? See, I could spin that. Of course, They would never use it in that sense, but it's the bias embedded within these news agencies.
One of the commenters said, "Look up spiteful mutant theories." So this is the Rational Wiki article. I'm going into it blind. I'm going into it raw. I don't know what this is. The spiteful mutant hypothesis is a pseudoscientific. That's how you know it's real, because it's on the Rational Wiki and they say it's pseudoscientific.
Just like
hypothesis developed Edward Dutton. It argues that a deleterious genetic mutations in human carrier can be externalized onto non-carriers via social epistasis. It is a hypothesis designed to justify a racist worldview as outlined in Dutton's book, Race Differences and Ethnocentrism. This is despite the fact that the concept of human races has been disproven. It's been disproven.
Yes.
That is quite the statement. One that is, well, I guess they've got a citation there. They just cite the whole book.
What's the book?
Douchebags.
What's the book?
It's The History and Geography of Human Genes by Luigi Luca Cavalli Sforza et al.
Oh, Cavalli Sforza. Okay, I believe he's a Jew. But is it a book? Because I know it was like a 12-page.
Well, it's from the Princeton University Press.
Oh, okay, so that one, I know about this one because Frame Games brought it up. Some of us might remember our blessed Jewish ally Frame Games. I don't know where he is anymore. But he characterized it very aptly, that research paper, as the continuum fallacy for 11 pages.
So
that's basically what it is. But it's been debunked because apparently we don't know what colors are.
Dutton primarily uses the spiteful mutant hypothesis to denigrate anyone who isn't conservative and who doesn't share his own far-right political views. He has labeled feminists, liberals, and supporters of Black Lives Matter as spiteful mutants. That's, I don't know why I'm so tickled by that label, but I kind of like it. That's gonna
They're very spiteful.
Yeah,
They're very spiteful.
No,
eventually they are mutants.
I actually like that a lot. I'm gonna start using that. That's gonna be my new go-to. You spiteful mutant.
I mean, here's the thing. You looked at how the absurd amount of hyperlinks that were at the bottom, number of references from this page.
Absolutely.
So, I mean, you got to imagine the people writing this, because there's a great video. There's some guy with a Boston accent talking about who's writing Wikipedia articles. And he was saying that Wikipedia, a lot of the important political ones, are unironically written by tranny communists or even furry communists.
Oh yeah, and if you look at like the records of all the edits, there's a lot of argumentation going on, and yeah, I mean, Wikipedia is good if you are looking for sources on things, like as a launching off point, or just like documented fact, like things that occurred.
Countless references and archiving them from Wikipedia. I'm not giving those bastards a dime, because when they ask for money from you, you have to keep in mind they're actually awash in cash. They have plenty of money. They don't need your money. They're just scamming you. Right. But I have siphoned a lot of articles from them, and I don't intend to pay them back.
The term social epistasis was coined in 2007 based on a study of ants. It is defined as interorganismal genomic interactions whereby the genome of an organism can influence another organism's gene expression and hence phenotypic development and condition, including behavior both negatively and positively. The former issues from deleterious mutations that can socially epistatically alter patterns of gene expression in pathological ways, and in mutations with deleterious effects on both carriers and non-carriers. This has been called spiteful mutations by Woodley. I guess maybe I'm just a midwit, or maybe it's because it's late and I'm like reading this aloud, but I'm not fully understanding what's.
I'm not either. It's academic scientific jargon. More specifically, scientific jargon. I don't want to denigrate it that much. I'm personally not a science guy.
Maybe you can enlighten us, dear commenter. What is the crux of this issue? Yeah, I yelled fire in a crowded theater.
I am looking for that 5-minute video about Wikipedia, though. I think it'd be productive to shine a light on the shitlib hegemony within Wikipedia.
By the overall trait expression by individual honeybee workers is modulated by the genotypic composition of the colony, indicating that individual level phenotypes and properties. There's no evidence who aren't eusocial. Furthermore, I wish they'd just give me the bottom line up front instead of trying to couch this in academic language.
Too bad. Get smarter, Goy. Skill issue.
Yeah. Dutton has been criticized on the basis that many of the ideas and beliefs he considers to be maladaptive are correlated with higher intelligence. Middling intelligence.
Yeah, they're called midwits for a reason.
It was demonstrated that atheists are more intelligent on average. How can high intelligence be compatible with the idea that atheists have harmful mutations? Well, but purple exists, so I can... Well, it's like, Ryan Falk will make this argument a lot, too. He's like, you can't envision any circumstance in which intelligence would be selected against. Like, people are walking around with heads the size of zeppelins because their brains are so big. Like, just because a trait is correlated with a higher than average intelligence does not necessarily make it a, sort of a eugenic trait. To explain how high intelligence could be maladaptive, Dutton argues that atheists might be too intelligent because a study of American Mensa members revealed that they have a much higher risk for psychological and developmental disorders, including autism spectrum disorder. Yeah, I mean, as you start to get on the tail ends of the bell curve there, people do start to get a little weird.
Yeah, that's true.
However, only individuals with very high IQ, rather than general high IQ, have a higher risk. Dutton's argument is therefore dubious. Is there, like, another source on this? I mean, there's a book. I don't want to buy a $25 book. And
yeah, well, if I remember anything about our last stream, Jim, we tend to spend too much time reading, plotting through stuff like this.
Yeah.
I
mean, if you've got the Jolly Heretic explains it pretty well, maybe we'll touch on that next time. I'll make a little note of it here. We'll dig into that. We are sort of approaching the 2 hour. Well, we have exceeded the 2 hour mark here. So.
I do want to finish on the video I sent to you over Gilded.
Yeah, sure.
Perhaps we could finish on that. The what's an academic term for what the video describes? The hegemonic influence of shitlibbery within Wikipedia and the reestablishment of political normativity.
Yeah, I can do the academic language too.
Yes, you can. Yeah. Wikipedia article is just it's not even a Wikipedia article. It's a
Wikipedia is.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's how you know it's like 10 times as bad.
One of the most important tools that we have for sharing.
You know he's a Chad because he's got a cigarette behind his ear.
Information right now.
No, just kidding. I don't condone smoking cigarettes.
Every day, millions of people use Wikipedia to learn about the world around them. People use Wikipedia to learn about things spanning from current day figures to political ideologies to ancient history. It's an easy way to learn about the world and to grasp many very difficult concepts. It is a very important learning tool. But who are the teachers? Who are the people who are writing and explaining the world to millions of people a day? So let's just start. What's a controversial topic that probably needs an unbiased and distant approach, something clinical, right, from an expert in the field? How about gender identity, transgenderism? I mean, articles about gender identity and transgenderism, they're probably written by doctors or scientists or something like that, someone who has like years and years of experience in this field. One such article was written by one Gwenny Nyan, a 6'6" male to female transgender who has sapphic sexuality, she, her. This lesbian transgender woman has one stepdaughter and one unofficially adopted.
That's how you know trannies aren't real, is it's like they're all male to female and they're all lesbians.
Yeah, especially the male to female part. I mean, of course, it's hilarious that you're a male to female lesbian, as in you're straight. Like, let's not mess around here.
Daughter, and is a pagan anarcho-communist. Gwenny Nyan is a voracious editor, and when not editing on Wikipedia.
But no, paganism is trad.
Oh, exactly. Jonathan Bowden was a pagan.
About gender.
Or
Gender or-
who is it? Anders Breivik in Norway. You know, he's shooting in July 2011. He was an Odinist, a Nordic pagan.
or transition-related things. You might also know her work from the Wikipedia page on the January 6th insurrection, as well as the impeachment trial of Donald Trump. The next user of importance who is editing and creating articles on transgenderism, gender identity, etc. is History Day 01. Most of their work deals with articles about gay, transgender, and bisexual characters in children's cartoons. History Day 01 is an autistic atheist who is exploring their sexuality. He is also a communist. Let's do some lightning rounds. Wandering Wand, transgender, psycho ma, furry, probably gay. Fun Crunch, agender, vegan, atheist, they, them, Black Lives Matter. He says that his main focus for the last 4 years of his life is being on Wikipedia in order to increase the representation of marginalized people such as black people, transgender people, and LGBT people. Fun Crunch has written many of the articles regarding the court cases, very famous court cases, which Donald Trump was a part of. They also wrote the article on white rage. One of the other frequent editors of gender identity Wikipedia articles and transgenderism articles is Guerrilla Warfare, who is a administrator for Wikipedia English, and just so happens to be queer and use she/her pronouns. I was seeing a pattern, but I needed to confirm it, so I checked out some articles on communism. Lightning round again! NMI 628, communist. Des Valet, communist. Beezit, communist. David King. Now this guy's special. He was in pretty much every single article that I was looking at. He is a pansexual anarcho-communist. I need to take a moment to address like how big of losers these people are. Like, I don't think anyone's going to believe me. These are the stats of David King. 38,000 posts over 8 years on Wikipedia. These guys have no life. They sit on this thing 28 hours a day, dude. They make up new hours to sit on Wikipedia every day. And it is not just him. Most of these people I've shown have over 10 years on this website, and most of them have had tens of thousands of articles that they've either written or edited. I mean, even in articles about recent or current events, America First, Nick Fuentes, who do you think's editing these articles? Blade Jogger, communist. Voltaire 1, transgender communist. Listen, there's a lot of good stuff on Wikipedia. There's a lot of articles you can read and wonders you can learn. You can do so much learning on Wikipedia. You just got to understand that a lot of the time, the article that you are reading is written by a gay, mentally ill, transgender, furry communist. The vast majority of America gets their news from mainstream sources, from CNN, stuff like that, and reads Twitter headlines of articles. And for the slim minority, 5% of the population, who looks deeper than that, who tries to find their own research, and you go on Wikipedia, you go on all these other websites which are supposed to provide truth, Google, and what do you find? You find that that is edited, that is skewed, that is lies as well. The issue isn't fake news, it's fake reality. It's that people are purposefully constructing false realities for people to live in and lying to them on purpose. They are teaching people a left-wing communist narrative and telling them that it is unbiased, that it's simply fact. Most Republicans don't even know that they're doing this. Most Republicans think that the greatest threat in the world is CNN, or Joe Biden, or Kamala Harris, or like the Taliban for some fucking reason. The left wing is fully engaged in asymmetric warfare against the right. It is trying to destroy everything, even reality. They are actively trying to brainwash your kids. And the majority of the people on the right still don't believe that we're even at war. But yeah, that's all. The answer was a bunch of fat losers. Wikipedia is...
And
I mean, it's so absurd. It's beyond, like, reality is beyond parody at this point. And I do like that he brings up that the left is literally at war with us, and we fail to realize that we are engaged in a conflict.
The boomers really don't get that part.
Well, and I mean, I know that video is like an hour long that I made, but that was what I spent a long time talking about in my video, sort of addressing the power grid attacks was that point. But I mean, I'm laughing through it because it's so, like, it's just beyond real. It's beyond real. I knew it was bad. I didn't know it was that bad. 30,000 separate posts. And what would
these people have no life. He's right when he says that.
Well, yeah, and I mean, what would be worthwhile for somebody to do? Somebody, I don't know, maybe even like Leather Apron Club or somebody on the right who does this sort of work is to go through prominent articles and not just like give a little 5-minute synopsis here, but like go in detail about these characters. Like let's start documenting who these people are, even if it's just by their, I'm not advocating doxing them obviously, but like, okay, we know Twitter tranny 123 is a complete fucking degenerate and disregard everything they say on their Wikipedia edits. And I feel as though at some point in the future they're going to take away the ability of us proles, us plebes, to see the people who have written these articles, especially if we start to like look into who is behind these posts. But for the time being, that would be a worthwhile thing to do.
And maybe buy lots of flash drives if we have the opportunity.
Yeah, that's the other thing.
Keep it stored somewhere.
Yeah, God help us if like one of the archive websites go down.
Oh, I know. I genuinely fear when that could
I mean,
happen.
I feel like it's an inevitability. The simple truth about Twitter: 10% of users account for 80% of all tweets. This includes original tweets, retweets, and quote tweets. Of this top 10%, 2/3 are women. So next time you see news headlines like Twitter names Megan Rapinoe, the real president after U.S. wins Women's World Cup, Twitter gives Donald Trump hell for historical inaccuracies in his hashtag parade fail. Twitter can't cope with George from Love Island's chat up technique. You're not seeing a consensus. You're seeing a small group of women talking very loudly with each other. And that's an excellent point to be made. And I mean, a lot of the consensus is astroturfed anyway. Like, there at least used to be a lot of bots on Twitter. But I guess maybe I'm naturally a little more inoculated to the idea that consensus equals truth, but that is something that I think the dissident right needs to double down on, is like, okay, just because a bunch of people believe X does not mean that X is true.
Like, and in conclusion, as if we're writing a high school essay, when you're reading Wikipedia, assume it's been written by tranny communists, and if you're reading tweets of any kind, assume it's a bunch of shitlib women. Okay? I think those are the two main takeaways.
But we'll wrap it up here. I think Jimmy John will look into Edward Dutton and the Jolly Heretic. I mean, if you want to email me a link if you've got one. I googled one real quick here and couldn't find what you were talking about. But we'll definitely dive into that. It's been real. I've personally had a good time. Thanks for coming and hanging out.
Yes, I had a great time.
We definitely will have more streams like this to follow. On a personal note, I will be making more content soon. I've got a couple of videos sort of started that I've got to get through. Hopefully my work-life balance will normalize a little bit here in the near future, so I can start churning out videos again. But thanks for the support as always.
Yes, I would like to say thank you for those who are still watching. All of you, I must say, I appreciate the time and the participation. I would like to thank you again. I appreciate it. We appreciate it. I speak
absolutely.
On behalf of Jim.
Absolutely. If you wouldn't mind like sharing this sort of stuff with like-minded individuals, that would go a long way to help us out. And
as Jared Taylor says with his videos, why don't you share it with some of your friends if they can stand it?
Yeah. Or even just, helping the algorithm by, throwing a thumbs up on the video, or like retweeting my tweets saying we're going to be streaming. It's always more interesting when we've got more people interacting.
Yeah.
I do like pulling in
makes it lots of fun.
Stuff from the audience. So.
And if there's stuff you want us to cover, in the rare instance that you would want us to cover something, please, pester and plaster us with stuff.
Absolutely. I mean, if you don't want to join the Gilded for one reason or another, I mean, my email is, on my channel. Feel free to shoot me an email. It'll go right to my phone. So, but join the Gilded if you're not there already, and we're, pretty interactive. It's a fun place to hang out.
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
Women with all those parentheses. I don't know what the context of that is, but I have a sneaking suspicion it's not in the name of Christ. But we'll sign off here. Thanks for hanging.